All right, welcome back once again. My name is Navpreet, or the more anglicized version is Nav, um, whatever you guys want to call me. Today I have a special guest. Her name's Asha Sawhney. Miss Asha studied at the Northwestern University. She studied a very niche topic, and we're going to spend a lot of time on that today. So, as many followers of the Sikh faith know, our founder, our widely recognized founder, Guru Nanak Dev Ji, is known for having traveled around many parts of the globe, specifically South Asia, Central Asia, and the Middle East. Part that he spent a lot of time, a country that he spent a lot of time in, what we now know as Afghanistan. He left a big impact there. And Ms. Asha actually did her undergraduate thesis on the ethnography of Afghan Sikhs in English. I believe it was the longest published English work on the topic, revisiting the Afghan Civil War and India's refugee policy from a Sikh perspective. She's currently a PhD student in sociology at the University of Illinois Urbana-Champaign. And I'll let you introduce yourself, Ms. Asha. Thank you for having me. Or excuse me. Thank you for being with me here.
Thank you for having me. Yeah, it's good to be here. I'm excited to talk about both my work and just my life in general. Yeah, I'm Asha, Asha Sawhney, Asha Marie Kaur Sawhney. Some of my work falls under that name as well. I really got my sort of career start from working with the Afghan Sikh community, and it's something that's kind of tied, I would say, my past and present and future together. So yeah, I'm really excited to talk about it and how that all came together, because it's been quite the journey, and it's something that's still going on and always changing.
Awesome. So why don't you start from your childhood? Give us some information on how your parents played a role in incorporating Sikh into your life. I know obviously your dad is from what's now Pakistan, or his family's from what's now Pakistan, in the Punjab area, and then your mom is I'm not 100% sure, but she's Caucasian.
She's from upstate New York.
Okay, your mom's from upstate New York. Obviously you grew up in Jersey. But you told me once that your mom played a big role in teaching you a lot about Sikhs. And so why don't you talk about your visits to the Gurdwara and, community functions when you were a kid?
Yeah, so my mom lives in Jersey now, and I'm currently there at the moment. But I grew up in Chicago. My dad moved to the States, I believe, in '86, and met my mom in Philadelphia. They're both in grad school. My dad was born to one parent who lived through partition and one parent who came from Iran, from the Iranian Sikh community to India. Both sides of my dad's family were displaced to Dehradun, where they came together. Growing up, I was pretty involved, in the Sikh community, despite that being not the expectation at all to come out of an interracial and interfaith marriage. My mom really kind of threw herself into the role of making sure my Sikh education was unbroken. She also for years, grew out her hair and did Seva consistently at the Gurdwara, and I would help her. She taught me all the Sakhis and as much Gurmukhi as she could, being someone who herself doesn't speak Punjabi. And my Dadima also spent time with us growing up, so she would kind of lay the groundwork, and my mom would continue it when my Dadima would go back to India. So yeah, my mom is still a practicing Christian, but she still does Seva, and she still goes to the Gurdwara. And she rode a motorcycle for a long time, and sometimes she would drive to a random place that had a Gurdwara, I don't know, in Wisconsin or whatever, and put on a bandana and walk in. with her, motorcycle gear, and everyone would be like, what is she doing here? But yeah, so yeah, I just want to tell anyone out there who thinks they come from an unconventional background, or maybe like is in a interfaith or interracial marriage themselves, that don't let the notion that you married outside of your culture is going to like do something to corrupt the next generation. Like everything's a choice, and Sikhi is a choice. It's not something you're born with. So I think that I really learned that.
Awesome. Thank you for sharing. You have a brother as well.
Yes, I do.
Not to, you don't have to out his entire personal life. I can interview him as well if I really wanted, if you really wanted to. But he keeps Gish.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
tell me about that decision for him. And obviously you grow your hair out as well. Tell me kind of what kind of, obviously your mom played a big role in, teaching you about Sikhi, but like you said, it wasn't the expectation.
Yeah,
it
definitely
there something
was.
Go ahead. You were going to say something more about that.
Oh yeah, I mean, I think that my mom made a promise to my daddy like early on that she would carry on the faith, and I think my mom did that not just out of obligation, but out of like a deep respect for the faith. My mom is a devoted follower of Guru Nanak Sahib, for example, and all the gurus. So it wasn't just something out of obligation, but yeah, it was something that was laid down when I was a child, much to a little bit of controversy on my mom's side of the family, who never really understood kind of why we needed to have these external symbols of faith. But yeah, it was something, and both my brother and I are still, we're really happy that we were raised this way. And it's not always been easy. I mean, this is the experience of probably every Sikh child in the United States, but
I only made it to 8 years old, so it's kudos to you guys who can do it for a lot longer.
Yeah, it wasn't easy for him, especially dealing with bullying, the kids just being really cruel, and honestly repeating stuff their parents definitely said to them, though none of the parents in our liberal hometown would admit that they were saying that. But where do you think the kids learn it from?
Yeah, of course.
The kind of comments from kids about my dad too, like when he'd pick me up from school, calling him Bin Laden, all that. But yeah, I don't know, we stayed strong in that. And we also, Chicago's not that far from Oak Creek, so that was kind of a difficult period of time as well. It felt very close to home. I was actually out of the country and like flying back when it happened, but my mom went up the next day to help the community kind of recuperate. So that was
from Oak Creek. That's right.
Yeah.
Okay. So I know we obviously, you talked about some very personal things right now with you and your brother and your dad as well. Now, how was 9/11, and more importantly, post 9/11, the immediate to, few years after for you and your family? I know you probably spent some time in Jersey during that time, and that's obviously close. So why don't you talk about that a little bit?
No, we were definitely in the Midwest for 9/11, but
Okay.
actually what's kind of I guess depressing is that wasn't the first time this reality hit really close, because I lived in Skokie, Illinois, first 2 years of my life, and when I was 3, I believe, there was a white supremacist string of shootings where a man shot Black, Asian, and Hasidic Jewish people that he just saw on the street. And my dad was actually out of town during that shooting, and my family was pretty shaken up by it because they felt like there was a Black man in our neighborhood who was shot while walking with his daughter. So my mom was especially, kind of thinking what would have happened like if your dad had been in town and been taking you for a walk. So then again, with 9/11, my dad traveled a lot for work, and he was actually in Colombia, I believe, like when this happened, and he wasn't sure like how he was going to get back into the country, and what that flight was going to look like. And yeah, my mom very quickly like told me and my brother things were going to be different now, and things were different. My brother started getting, secondary screening, and he was only 3 when 9/11 happened. And my whole life I've kind of dealt with the airport stuff, you know, boarding passes getting flagged and annoying comments, especially obviously much more when I'm with my dad and brother.
Sure.
But I've also, I think it's kind of, there's kind of this weird feedback loop where like, I've gotten comments from TSA officers who clearly only know I'm a Sikh because they went through some like sensitivity training, but then that like allows them to figure out who I am and then make an annoying comment about it. So like I was wearing a kirpan necklace, and this one's like a handmade one, and they were like, oh, do we let those people with the swords through if it's
Yeah.
a necklace? I was like, those people, it's kind of better if they hadn't gotten that PowerPoint, they may have just thought I was wearing a necklace. So I thought that was like kind of an interesting flaw in some of these like diversity trainings. So
Yeah, it's like the answer isn't always diversity training. It doesn't actually resonate the way
it's
it
like,
might
well,
be intended to, or maybe it does. Maybe it's, but
yeah, backfired a
yeah.
bit, I think. But we could get into that whole like what
Yeah.
the real method is there. But yeah, and definitely like, then the comments started,
We'll
growing
actually
up.
flip the script
Yeah.
quite a bit, but I wanted to, you mentioned something about you said your grandma was from Iran,
Hmm.
from a Sikh community in Iran. And, tying that into your undergrad research, did that maybe serve as a catalyst for you in wanting to know more about the Afghan Sikhs? And, or why don't you explain kind of how you got into that realm and what
Yeah,
piqued your interest?
definitely. Yeah, no, she definitely was a catalyst for this. And I think it became a journey for both of us until she passed away this year from COVID, unfortunately. But I think in 2015, maybe 2014, 2015, we were driving through Delhi and we passed by, now looking back, I'm pretty sure it was Lajpat Nagar, but there were all these signs in Farsi. And I said something about the Urdu signs. I couldn't read Arabic script at that point, but my Dadima could, and she said, no, those aren't Urdu signs. Those are Farsi signs. There's a lot of Sikhs here from Afghanistan, and a lot of people treat them differently and don't understand like why they speak Punjabi differently, or like why they look different. A lot of them say, oh, look at them, they look strange, they're too tall, especially the Pashtun Sikhs, they're too tall, their eyes are blue. But she said that whenever she met people from Afghanistan, it felt like home because she was born just 70 miles from the Afghanistan, Pakistan, Iran border. And so she said, we should always make an effort to welcome Sikhs of all types to this country. As the catalyst, I really got interested. I talked to her about, it was around that time that I started talking to her more about how she was not from Punjab. She was, Punjabi ethnically, but she grew up in Zahedan, Iran. Her family traded between Quetta and Zahedan because these are the two major cities of Balochistan. And my great grandparents spoke Farsi fluently. I mean, to the extent that they really knew poetry well too. And so yeah, I started to get interested. I got really interested linguistically at first, and I think that became the opening because now I had a skill, and I also had an opening into the community. Starting the conversation by saying, oh, like my family is from Zahedan, like it just opens a whole different world. There's like a sense of like, oh, you know what it means to be from the periphery of what's considered like the traditional Sikh population or Sikh communities. So it really allowed me to like have conversations I wouldn't have been able to have otherwise.
So you mentioned that a lot of Indians would treat these Sikhs from Afghanistan different, even though they were, obviously residents of India now. Um, Describe what you learned in your research. I know you mentioned something in the past to me about the immigration policy, and obviously that's a big part of your research. So can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, I think I mean, one of the big takeaways from my undergraduate thesis, which I've sent freely to anyone who's wanted it, was that there's kind of this simultaneous process of assuming that it's very easy for Afghan Sikhs to assimilate because supposedly India is their homeland in a sense. Some people say in a sense, and some people say very staunchly that anyone who's not Muslim, this is their homeland. There's a notion that they are ethnically Punjabi, which is not true. And there's this idea that it's much safer than Afghanistan, so the assimilation path must be very easy. The same people who say the assimilation must be easy also discriminate against Afghan Sikhs much of the time, assume that they're affiliated with the black market, calling them crooks, saying they're driving up housing prices, that they're fake refugees because real refugees wouldn't have businesses. And then when you look at the actual policy side, the majority of Afghan Sikhs who currently reside in Delhi came between the years of 1990 and 1996 during Mujahideen fighting and rule, and have been in a state of limbo ever since. Even before CAA, they were eligible for citizenship in theory. They very rarely, without some form of kind of corruption, achieve any, and that's only available to the wealthy, achieve naturalization. CAA has not changed that, and something I really want to emphasize for people who are following the issue more recently is that CAA is only applicable to people who arrived before 2014. So the Save Afghan Sikhs movement, of which I'm a part of, to deal with the extreme situation of the last few years, ever since the attack in Jalalabad in 2018 and the attack in Kabul this past year, CAA is not applicable to these groups of people. India might celebrate their arrival, but there is no pathway to naturalization. And I think what people don't know is how serious that is. That means you're stuck in India. If your kid moves abroad, you won't be able to see them. It is very hard to do basic activities in India these days without requisite documentation, especially with Aadhaar cards being the norm now. There are people who won't rent to you. It's hard to get, you get accused of being in the black market, but you also have a hard time getting legal work. It's hard to enroll kids in school. And a lot of this just has to do with the deep xenophobia that kind of permeates Indian bureaucracy. Technically, more of these things should be available to non-naturalized people, but in practice, they're not. And there's no effort to try to naturalize people at that much quicker of a pace. So
Yeah, so obviously you mentioned that their equivalent of kind of like a social welfare system doesn't apply to them because they're not really recognized as Indians. And obviously they're not ethnically, but that they were kind of forced there. So what does the Afghan government or any kind of agency in Afghan what role did they play? Obviously, you said there was a lot of fighting and instability there.
yeah, I think if we're looking at the current situation, it's a little contradictory because the official government claims that they really support religious minorities, and they're actually very invested in trying to keep the last Sikhs of Afghanistan in Afghanistan, which I think is really self-serving of the government. Frankly, the official government has so little control, and that's getting worse. The Taliban are having more and more control, And then the real kind of
right, and the U.S. just drew so.
Yeah, and with the US leaving, that's getting worse. And then there's a incessant violence by the Islamic State of Khorasan province, which will not be stopped by the Taliban. So the most of the attacks have been happening have been by this other group, but there's no one who's capable and willing to stop them. The Taliban attitude towards religious minorities is let them die, you know. Yeah, it's not that they, even if they're not the ones attacking them, they'll leave them to die like that. And that is and also anyone who speaks out even mildly of the Taliban and their aims is obviously in grave physical danger. So yeah, it's but you'll see a lot of official communications both by the US and Afghanistan that are vested in trying to keep this proof that Afghanistan is a, you know, tolerant place, like keeping them in place. And I take great issue with that because the consensus for the most part in the community is this is our homeland, it will always be our homeland, but we need to save ourselves. So we need to get ourselves to safety, whatever that means. And there perhaps at this point, the number of people who genuinely want to stay has gotten incredibly low. So but there's vested interest in trying to prove that religious freedom can be can be salvaged, but frankly there isn't. The government is extremely weak. The Taliban are, you know, extreme fundamentalists, and ISKP is getting stronger and stronger, even though the US claims that they're not. So that has just been a very frustrating element of analysis.
So then, what kind of role, obviously now we're jumping back, but what kind of role do the Afghan Sikhs play in the Gurdwara in India? Do they have, obviously you know that, you know, with technicalities, Gurdwara, they should be open to any caste, creed, but are there Gurdwara where they kind of run more in India, or has that kind of been an obstacle for them as well that you know of?
Yeah, no, there are several Gurdwara in Delhi that are Afghan run, and therefore don't fall under the management of one of my cats. Don't fall under the management not, I don't know if this is true for all of them, but most of them don't fall under the management of the Delhi Sikh Gurdwara Management Committee. So sometimes I know that when I was doing my field work, there's a lot of controversy over like facilitating an undergraduate for interfaith couples and stuff, and the Afghan Sangats have kind of like decided we're not going to get like involved in this controversy. We're going to just do an undergraduate for those who seek it and have a genuine desire. So that was something that was interesting to me, that what kind of latitude occurred like based on this like kind of management. And yeah, and there's also Gurdwara that are more of the Pashtun Sikh population, so who really strongly identify with their ethnic affiliation. Even amongst Afghan Sikhs, everyone will tell you like Pashtun Sikhs are like quite proud. So yeah, there's
been a prevailing thing, obviously, you know, wherever they've been.
Yeah.
Anand Cottage, for those, if anyone's listening and is unfamiliar, it's just the marriage process of Sikhs. But so you're doing your PhD now in sociology. Is your research now similar to what you were doing in undergrad, or did you take any turn?
Yeah, I'm definitely taking a turn. I'm kind of interested more largely in Seva and its impact. I think that, you know, right now we're seeing Seva taking like a really front and center role in dealing with the pandemic as well as disaster relief due to climate change related weather events. And it's something that is, you know, it's kind of shocking to me that millions of meals come out of Seva every day. Tens of thousands of oxygen cylinders did. You know, you have this very long-standing social support
Process,
network
yeah.
for people, and it's not been studied. We don't even have close to a number of like how many meals per day, something like that. You might see a fleeting article that says Darbar Sahib gives out
100,000, yeah.
100,000
That was the
meals
one
in
I
Langar,
read a few
Bangla
years ago,
Sahib
yeah.
60,000, something like that. But you know, these are just for the major centers. Like, what about the tens of thousands of smaller gurdwara? And so so that's something I'm interested in. And also the role of not just the Gurdwara, but also like Sikh NGOs and NGOs that kind of take a Seva model. And something I've been saying a lot is that these are interesting because they're truly public spaces. They're truly first come, first serve. And they are privately funded, but operate on a public no cost model. And these are institutions that are readily accessible to non-Sikhs, and people seek them out too. Like, people go out of, they know that this is a good place to look for help in a time of crisis. And we're only going to have more and more crises. So something I really would like to do is to like empirically study not just the impact, but also how is it done. I think there was a really interesting little tidbit that I saw in an interview that a Sky News reporter was doing with some volunteers outside of, I think, a Gurdwara in Ghaziabad, and they were passing out oxygen cylinders, and the journalist said, well, the government has said that they can't provide oxygen, so how are you able to? And he said, I don't know, you should go ask the government about that, because we figured it out. And I have talked closely with people who, you know, did this work on the ground, and who called up every factory owner they knew that had oxygen in their plants, who rerouted trucking routes, who got stopped by the police, you know, for carrying oxygen cylinders in their trucks and trying to enter the capital region. There are people who, you know, one day we're on the side of the road fixing the punctures and tires, and the next day we're, you know, monitoring oxygen cylinders for COVID patients, because these things have to be managed carefully or oxygen can explode very easily. So it's just like taking the capitalist system and actually like rewiring it to be a public good, and like doing it very fast before the government could even like pretend to like be fixing the problem. Yeah.
Sure, yeah, no, that's obviously it's in a lot of ways it could be viewed kind of as a band-aid, but when people are, you know, dying left and right, you have to have an immediate response. And it's really kind of what a lot of organizations did, and a lot of, like you said, just Sikhs on the ground in India did. Now, you mentioned obviously Seva that exists worldwide. The essence of Seva, it really started, obviously there wasn't no such thing as like a, you know, on paper Sikh when Seva and Langar started, Langar being the free meal. So of course, like, you know, people fail to recognize that like, it's going to just be open to everyone, and that's because that was the purpose of it. Are you seeing anything done in North America, or is that outside of your research right now?
Being done in what sense?
North America, or are you studying North America?
Am I studying
Because
North
obviously
America?
it's being done, obviously, but I just wanted to know.
Yeah, no, I would love to just like write a book someday about Seva worldwide. I've seen a lot of interesting, I'm constantly trying to like reflect on like, are we meeting our principles, you know? Something that I think about in the North American context is how the space that a Gurdwara takes up has a lot to do with like how well the Seva is conducted. So like here in Jersey, the closest Gurdwara is the Jersey City Gurdwara, and I really like it because it's a truly urban and accessible location, and homeless people, you know, eat there every day and like, you know, join in with the Sangat. And that's the same with the one on Devon Street in Chicago. And then both in Chicago and the Jersey area, you have these like kind of palatial suburban locations that are not accessible. And honestly, I think ostentatiously spend their money on decor and whatnot. So that's something I think about a lot in the North American context is like the placement and the kind of community that's meant to be served. Is it, you know, does it have the working class in mind? Or is it like a suburban enclave? And then a really interesting experience my brother and I had. My brother studied abroad in Argentina, and he did not think that there were any there was any Sikh presence in Buenos Aires. But someone from his program actually sent him like, you know, little information about a kind of like an informal Gurdwara space that would like, basically it was a building that was used, they would do like a full Divan and Langar like once a month. And so he got involved with the Sikh community there, which was kind of like part long time Punjabi residents of Argentina who had been brought to work the fields, as well as converts who were, you know, Argentinians, they were Hispanic, and they, though they only met once a week for a full Divan and Langar, they were all the time out there doing work in the community, feeding the homeless, helping people who are addicted to drugs, like just doing really good work, and always standing on the right side of history when it came to any sort of debate over a marginalized population in Argentina. So that was really cool. And also I went for I was visiting, and it happened to be around the time they did the full Divan, and like just sitting in this like kirtan and like listening to people speaking Spanish, like you hardly hear English being spoken at the Gurdwara, like, for people to be so, and like I guess I don't know if this is like officially his title, but I would say the Pradhan of this Sangat like is still learning Punjabi, like he's still figuring it out, but like he's, you know, clearly a devoted Sikh, and no one would question that. And you know,
the thing is, that's not the end goal by any means. There's no really end goal. Obviously, with the process that they're starting and creating, it's an effective process because the people who need help, it sounds like, are getting help. So that's good to hear.
Yeah, so that was really, that gave me kind of the energy to go back to the US and be like, you know, we can also open up our minds about like, who is a Sikh? Are we actually doing Seva for like the full community that we live in? All those things. So yeah, that was a really cool experience for me.
That's good to hear. Obviously, you mentioned there's a lot of suburban Gurdwara, and I have obviously a lot of family in Canada, and they're usually their narrative around them. It sounds cynical, but it's mostly kind of in a humorous, sarcastic way, just kind of like they installed new floors, they did this, they built a new parking lot. And the point is obviously missed, the essence is gone. But that's a whole nother animal, and there's like, a lot of money there.
Marble flooring for the education hall, like, but not a lot of books.
You know, it's funny, I did see actually a decent amount of books at some of them, but
that's good.
That they're covering a lot of ends, but there's, like I said, there's a lot of money there. Obviously I don't have a tangible amount with that, but it's easy to see if you just step there that there's, you know, obviously a lot of wealth. Anything else you wanted to mention, you know, about, you know, your research, tying it with your public life, or excuse me, your private life, or anything?
No, it's been a really great experience. I'm still working with the community. I've been trying, it's been a success for the past year actually, and I'm really trying to push it as long as I can, like to institute kind of a universal basic income for refugee families who need it. I think this is something that we need to remember, is that we need to move outside of all these kind of non-profit traps of thinking about like means testing and conditions to kind of like the support that people need. So that's been really great. Yeah, it's I wouldn't say it's always been easy trying to like tie being a Sikh with my work, with speaking out. I've definitely been on the receiving end of some haters, one could say. You know, and I think it's not really a coincidence that it happens a lot when someone's a woman or, you know, presents himself in any way that's like not considered the typical or ideal way of being a Sikh. So, but it's been okay. I really care about my work, and there's just I was sitting down and making a list of organizations today of Sikh institutions that really made a difference in the second COVID wave in India, and it really made me like so happy to be a part of the community and to be a part of this work. And there's a lot of really incredible people out there. So just trying to, you know, do what I can to collect information in a way that makes us learn something and that we can actually do things even better. You know, I don't want this just to be reflections. I want something to come out of it, which is why I did try to transition from researching Afghan Sikh communities to instituting the universal basic income for a set of families that needed it.
Mm-hmm. Any institutions you'd like to plug?
Himkund Foundation, absolutely incredible human beings. Yeah, I just have a lot of respect for them. So follow them on social media, donate to them. They're very good. Yeah, Khalsa Aid's been doing amazing work, and also they have a lot of reach in a lot of countries. And
yes,
the climate crisis we're entering is going to hit far and wide. So they really know how to mobilize quick. There's no place that's out of their reach. So
yeah, they're one of the better known ones. But all these, I do want to mention, just like anybody who made it this far into this interview, all of these organizations, they will be in my post.
And then
as well as your research.
I also recommend checking out this website called Seva all, which showcases some of the work that Sikh institutions have been doing in Delhi to cope with. It's not just about the COVID pandemic. What I'm seeing is that people are really tying the pandemic into the larger realm of like disasters and climate crises, so that we're ahead of the curve. So that's good. If only some politicians could understand that, that would be great. Yeah,
we're working with what we have right now.
Yeah,
take it for what it is. Well, thank you for your time. Definitely the work you're doing, I want to mention, is definitely against the grains of what's expected from Punjabis or Sikhs. So I appreciate that. I'm sure a lot of listeners will appreciate that as well. Thanks for sharing, your work. Continue doing it, and I'm looking forward to hearing more about obviously the impact of Seva globally in India as well. So thank you.
Thank you so much. This was really nice to have this little talk, and I love the series idea, and I love the title. That's
I appreciate it. Yeah, clever. Okay, thank you.